I was recently tagged in a Facebook post asking for my input, the hypothetical of if WSU had taken action sooner, maybe he wouldn't have been where he was at the time he was to intersect with these people. Let me preface this whole episode saying that the short answer is yes. Things could have been different in an alternate timeline to address certain behaviors or to mitigate certain policy breaches. Then he may not have been where he was in that, time and space. But remember at the end of the day that lives still would have been lost, because when you're someone like BK, you're going to do harm if you're committed to doing harm. It just wouldn't have been these 4 people, but it still would have been somebody. But let's workshop this a little bit, shall we? Here's the loophole. If he did not disclose, the university does not have to consider or protect him from any of the consequences of his actions.
Autism isn't the traits that he had. They probably were like, well, this looks bad. We're just going to use this term to kind of excuse some of this behavior. Hey gang, welcome to the Jury Duty Podcast. We are your hosts. I am Lindsey. That is my co-host bestie, Kimberly. Kimberly, how's it going?
It's second Monday.
It's second Monday.
That's all.
Yeah. Welcome to the podcast. I know that we were saying we're going to have a guest come on that's going to make your brain explode, but here's the thing. Hear me out. Don't hit the X. Just hear me out on this. We're going to have this person, but I think the timing has to be right. And I'm thinking that after Donna is done in like 2.5-ish weeks or something like that, I think what we want this person for and the subject that I want her on for will be super appropriate. And you guys are going to be like, wow, that's really full circle here. You know what I'm saying? Yep. Today, we're going to kind of go back to some BK coverage. So if you guys have watched our Vinny episode, the most recent one, we know there was audio issues. It wasn't our fault. YouTube has had audio issues across the board the past couple of weeks.
It's bullying us.
It's bullying us. I feel like a target, but it's fine.
It's fine.
I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let it go.
Everything is fine.
Everything is
fine.
Anyway. So we talked to him about BK a little bit. Can you say death penalty on YouTube? I think you can.
I mean, you just did.
I just did. Maybe you'll bleep it out. DP.
D-pen.
D-pen.
You get one. You got one.
Yeah. It was really interesting to me because he was talking about, I know like there are people who are like, yay, death penalty, DP, depend. And yay or no. And I think he brought up a really good point is to like, if the DP is not for BK, then who is it for? Right.
And the second thought I had on that was, I think, okay, if you get to say the D-pen word, I get to say this one today. It's absolute bullshit to say, well, we don't know that he would have been honest. You're telling me that every other person that came before him that gave information in order to get off of a severe punishment was honest and that they were all upstanding citizens? That's absolute horseshit. Okay? Terrible excuse.
Terrible excuse.
The end.
Go back and watch that one because I think it's a really interesting conversation and place to think about the DP as opposed to like if you're for it or against it, but just having it in general. I think it's, super interesting. If not for BK, then who would it be for? Right.
Right.
That being said, Kimberly and I have had a couple conversations about, and maybe you guys have seen this, like Kimberly and I haven't talked about this and we haven't talked about this. I've seen on a lot of, like, for example, People Magazine, hashtag
a reputable news source.
Yeah. They were talking a lot about, and they've had several stories on this, about the complaints against him while he was in college, getting different degrees and stuff like that. Lots of complaints. And they were talking about, how do you handle that with a student who you're concerned about? If you didn't know this, Kimberly is an expert on said subject. I said it. Expert. SME.
I am a SME, yes.
A SME.
Yeah.
Subject matter expert, for those in the back who don't know what that means.
It's corporate acronyming at its finest.
Yeah, corporate acronyming. So anyways, we wanted to kind of discuss this. I'm going to throw it to Kimberly because I will have questions. She has all the answers. I know nothing about this. It's super interesting. So, Kimberly, take it away.
I have a lozenge in my mouth because I'm going to talk a lot. So
enjoy that lozenge.
Just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's not ASMR on purpose. But I was recently tagged in a Facebook post asking for my input on how BK was handled at school and whether different actions or reactions to policy infractions or behavioral issues would have prevented this homicide from happening. And I had never thought about it like that because maybe I've seen bits and pieces of this on the internet somewhere, like everyone could have done more, but I never actually thought about it. And the short answer, would something have been different to the point where it could have prevented this from happening? The short answer is yes, but it's an interesting angle that I hadn't considered. And in lieu of all the stuff coming out from especially WSU about the experiences others had with him, the hypothetical of if WSU had taken action sooner, maybe he wouldn't have been where he was at the time he was to intersect with these people and foiled his plans. So let me preface this whole episode by, again, saying that the short answer is yes. Things would have or could have been different in an alternate timeline had there been more action to address certain behaviors or to mitigate certain policy breaches. Then he may not have been where he was in that, time and space. But remember, at the end of the day, that lives still would have been lost, because when you're someone like BK and your pathology is this bleh, you're going to do harm if you're committed to doing harm. It just wouldn't have been these 4 people, but it still would have been somebody. And that's still not a scenario that we want to see. But let's workshop this a little bit, shall we? I have some notes because there's so much information to work with from all the recent stuff that I'm good. I'm not that good, though. But how do I know this? And what is my opinion? I am a SME. Much like the BK-ster himself, I have over-degreed myself. Forensic psychology was an area of Psi D for me. But I used to be an administrator, a very high-ranking administrator in a very large university, as well as a student conduct officer. And one of the people they've released interviews from is someone sort of in that capacity. I'm going to assume it's maybe more of an ombudsman role, but they talk about OCR complaints, which I handled a lot. But the environment I worked in was pretty unique. And the framework that I created for that sort of niche in administration probably informs some of WSU's existing policies. So I went back, did some digging. I'll give you some background on what they did and tackle this hypothetical. There were 13, apparently, formal complaints lodged against him at WSU alone. Gotta say, I never thought I'd get this much action on this really banal topic, but let's get into it.
But wait, I have a question for those of us who have never experienced something like this. Like, okay, so it's kind of a 2-parter. Like, why would someone go to do a formal complaint, and how would one do that? Like, is it like you've been abused in some way and you go to the administration, or you have had threats? Like, what does that tell us what this looks like?
It's going to be different depending on where you are. Every institution is going to have a different process. And that's why my role was so unique, because at the organization that I was at, as the director, it was my job to actually create a whole department just for student appeals and conduct. Whereas Most institutions have those functions sort of embedded elsewhere, like in the office of the registrar or academic advising or the health center or the dean's office. It's not really a standalone function anywhere else. So it really depends. But yeah, the first thing that you should do, if it's possible at all, I used to have a sign on my desk that said this, but did you document it? Document it however you can. Pro tip that I used frequently, and I use this in my personal life as well. Anytime you have an unsettling interaction with someone or conversation, or maybe you wish that you could show something for it because it left you feeling some kind of way. If it's not dangerous for you, my trick is I either send an email or a text like, hey, our conversation about XYZ, blah, blah, blah. And when you said blah, 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 made me feel like this or whatever. Even if they don't respond in some way that's sort of tacit compliance, by not arguing or disputing it, the lack of response is also sort of an acknowledgement. Because most people that haven't done something or don't think they've done something are going to be quick to defend themselves. So document however you can. And if you can't, that's fine. Talk to somebody, whether it's the ombudsman, the dean, whoever at the organization you're at or the university. I keep saying organization. I've switched from higher learning to corporate America. So I'm like, bleh. Start within your own hierarchy. And if it's not appropriate, then there's always resources that you can find on the internet now. 10, 15 years ago, it might have been a little more difficult, but there's so much information. If you're at WSU, for example, if you just Google WSU student conduct, the whole honor code pops up with a website, with a form, with an email address, with an address for the on-campus building and the people you should talk to. Don't just assume it won't happen again or assume that it won't escalate, but it could be a form, an email, a face-to-face meeting, mediation. It really just depends where you are. But the first step is always don't keep it to yourself. You need to create an audit trail of any kind, which is something we'll talk about today, actually. So, yeah. And it's uncomfortable. They might make you face the person you're accusing of doing something, but would you rather do that and have an uncomfortable experience than not do anything at all and just suffer in silence?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah. Did I forget the second part, or did I make that a really long answer? So future Kimberly is editing this episode and realized I did not, in fact, actually answer all of Lindsey's question. And the first part was, what can I report and when should I report it? And this is super important, and I want everyone to hear this. I encourage you never to let anything, in the context here, if you're a university student at least, don't let anything get so out of hand that you can't manage it anymore. But the what is a longer answer. There's no right or wrong way or one size fits all to this question, but let me give you some guidance based on my experience dealing with student conduct, being an interventionist that had to settle and mitigate those conflicts and jump in the middle. I've seen everything. So here's my advice. If it is disruptive to you, or you feel in any way that you can't manage comfortably, or you can't manage unless it's mitigated, or you feel at risk, or someone else is at risk, or anyone's well-being, yours included, is, on the table. Whether that's disruptive bullying behaviors, harassment, discrimination, feeling you're being predated and someone is preying on you, and things like stalking, the range is wide. We're all going to have different experiences and perceive things very differently, and our threshold and comfort levels won't be the same. So if your gut is telling you something is wrong and you're not comfortable, or you need help to resolve something or mitigate something or to intervene somehow, don't second guess it, report it at the very outset. Someone else can help reassure you or give you resources and intervene. If it's not a severe issue, you'll feel a lot better reporting it than not. And if the fear of response or retaliation is a problem that you need to confront, then be upfront about that when you report it. Sometimes you can do things anonymously, sometimes not, because in a lot of cases, not just with the law, you have a right to face your accuser. But there are some situations where that might be necessary. But the truth is, if nobody ever reports it and we all just enable people because we're afraid of what might happen in circumstances, maybe not as severe as what's happening with this BK case, but everyday things like bullying or things that could be mitigated if someone actually cared. If you don't say anything, there are probably many other people that also chose not to say something. And this person will just feel empowered by that and keep doing it. But if your gut's telling you you need to share something with someone and get some help, then you absolutely never, ever ignore your gut. If you don't know who, start with the situation and who would be an authority or someone that's sort of refereeing, so to speak. If it's in a classroom, it's the professor. If it's on campus, just out and about and someone's harassing you, maybe it is security. But poke around online, talk to a counselor, talk to anybody that works at your university, and they will probably be able to point you in the right place. But your peace of mind is not worth someone else's empowerment. So with that, trust your gut and be safe. We want others to make good choices just like we want you to make good choices, but we can't rely on or control anyone but ourselves in situations like this. So please don't forget that there are situations where your university might be a mandated reporter in scenarios that are health and life safety. So when in doubt, report it. The worst that's going to happen is you won't know how it's handled because it's usually not shared unless there's an outcome for you that you're waiting for. But just know that your gut's not wrong. Trust it, report it, and go from there. And if you ever actually need a hand-holding walkthrough or advice or just someone to listen to you because you don't know what to do and you just want a gut check, you know where to find me. I'm here. And I'm always happy to listen. So back to the episode.
No, you answered the question. No, I was just going to say.
Ask me for the time. I'll build you a clock.
No, you answer the question because it's, if it's something that is serious that you feel unsafe or something that's unsettling, like you start with your chain of command, as one might say,
If it's in a class, talk to your instructor or your professor. Yeah. And if you don't think they're going to handle it, fine. Even if you like them and you trust them, don't stop there. Go to your academic advisor, go to the registrar's office. Don't just leave it in one person's hands. Mm-hmm. You can never overly advocate for yourself is what I'll say. Let's talk about let's separate this into two parts. Part one is what happened at DeSales. Part two, what happened at WSU, because both of these in this butterfly effect hypothetical scenario could have impacted the outcomes differently. And we'll be very broad strokes here because there's so much stuff. So at DeSales, when he was finishing his master's degree, that's when he posted that famous Reddit survey, this call to action for participants in this study. I will pop, you know what? Let me see if I can get this to come up on the screen because a visual will be helpful. But if it doesn't, it doesn't. And I will just, talk through it. When he posted this Reddit survey, I found two versions. One, which is possibly the one that got removed and blocked, like, hey, we're not putting this up. And the second one is probably the final version he put back up when he got done arguing with Reddit. The survey is no longer active. So people can stop trying to find it online. It's gone finally. It took DeSales long enough to take it down and Reddit to do the same. In any case, we're going to focus on the second one. Interestingly, both of these ads for human subjects have some but not all of the requirements he'd need to pass a sniff test if he was really doing his homework. Because the argument is, of course, if you want to be a crazy homicidal maniac, this is what you'd write. But what a great cover. He's studying crime. I'll say this. The likelihood that he was actually doing an assignment, but using it as a way to moonlight to satisfy his own personal kinks, very possible. I don't think this was fake. I think he was just taking advantage of the opportunity. On its face, it looks legit. In the first post, he linked an official DeSales Qualtrics platform. So the survey itself, which was actually being housed in the DeSales server. So he did have this project funneled through university resources. So that's the first tip off that it was probably legitimate. Find it hard to believe it wasn't, especially because on the second version of it, he actually put 2 email addresses for professors allegedly sponsoring this project. The first post also mentions that it has IRB approval. The second post that is missing. It's a hot mess. He couldn't be consistent to save his life. But both of the posts do cover informed consent. They don't fully, completely address the information you'd have to put for IRB. But what is IRB? It is a standard. Most, if not all, universities will have it. I say not all, because smaller colleges or institutions, that only have undergrad programs or whatever, they might not have their own internally dedicated IRB team. They get it externally, but it means Institutional Review Board. And IRBs are mandated through the Department of Health and Human Services, which regulates oversight for research involving human subjects at federally funded institutions. So not, hey, we run because the government pays our college to run, but receiving federal funds. And if you guessed it right, that means financial aid. So any school receiving financial aid that has any type of research component to it has to have some IRB system. It's basically a committee that has oversight and responsibility to review and monitor any biomedical or socio-behavioral research to make sure that human subjects that are participating, their rights, their welfare, everything is covered and follow federal regulations. So it's basically an ethics watchdog, depending on the scale and scope of the project you're doing, the level of involvement or observations of humans. There's a laundry list of stuff that you have to do to guarantee oversight, checks and balances, audit trails, so that people can check, did you get informed consent? Are you following the rules that govern ethical and moral, responsible human research? But yeah, anytime you want to conduct research that involves external people that you have to get their engagement, you need to get IRB approval. And since this was sourced through the DeSales website and hosted this survey for him, I'm going to say that this was probably, at least on its face, a legitimate assignment. And failure to comply or working without IRB approval is really serious. It could lead to immediate dismissal from the institution you're at. So if you've ever heard of the Stanford prison experiment, or, the human rights violations of the not safe for YouTube word that rhymes with schnazis, that is why IRBs exist. That's a predicate for this type of homework. So the fact that he listed it there and some other people's emails, it was probably legit. That's covered. We know that he was probably, in all likelihood, actually using this as a guise, but doing legitimate work. We may never know. Unfortunately, even his permanent incarceration does not mean that his education records will be released, because they're still protected by FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act that covers your educational records being private to you and the institution. So we may have seen those records in court if they wanted to talk about his misbehavior, or that it was fake, or that he didn't get approval. I don't know. Maybe if he hadn't confessed, these records would have been subpoenaed, which is one of the only ways to get them. I did find it interesting, though, that one of the directors of communication, or I forget her title, her name was Carolyn Steigelman, though. She was on the record a year, maybe more ago, saying that she can't confirm or deny or acknowledge an awareness of him having an IRB approved project. So that's probably because of FERPA, and she couldn't say anything about it.
I was gonna say she's probably like, I don't want to get in trouble.
Right.
I
but
want this to go away.
Yeah, all signs point, though, he was doing some type of work. But so I'm not busting a myth, but it was really the perfect cover to sort of satiate his real motivation, and he was double dipping. However, had he not properly followed all of the rules, did all the documentation he was supposed to do, he absolutely could have been dismissed, and that would have monkey wrenched all of his plans. He wouldn't have finished his degree at the time that he did. He would have had to go to a new school. Then he wouldn't have ended up at WSU when he was there. So could it have been a butterfly ripple? Maybe. It's possible. But the second part, the WSU stuff that's all over the news right now, I'm going to try. I'm going to try to stay as 1,000-foot view as I can, because it's a lot. Let's quickly run through just some of the things that we know has happened. The first being that a faculty member actually involved in student conduct, probably someone just like me, described feeling uncomfortable with him, that he would follow her to the parking lot, linger too long, and that she eventually wanted a secure escort to her car. Apparently, part of his behavior in that and other scenarios led to required compliance training that he just kind of apparently did one of these the whole time, which I find interesting. I do know that part of this was the documentation for the OCR case, which, if that sounds like gibberish, I'll explain it. But one of the reports in the document dump indicates that this person, this female employee, filed an OCR complaint. I'll get to it. There was an email sent between two colleagues saying, help me, this convo is weird, like the SOS. Oh my gosh, my mom's car broke down. Lovely first date, have to go. Like that kind of a, help me. So that's useful. It's documented. It's ambiguous, but that's a start. Faculty members and students described him as domineering, sexist, xenophobic, homophobic, macho, defensive, aloof, argumentative, that he often behaved differently towards female professors and students than he did with men. He'd hover in doorways and block people from exiting, which, fun fact, in some states, that's considered a form of kidnapping. If you can't willfully exit a domicile or a place and you're being held there against your will, that's kidnapping. A stalking report was filed by a female, I believe, faculty member who, again, parking lot issues, safety, that he was rude, he upset other people. He would take a grade from a female professor who might not have been native to the United States, take it to a man to have it graded because she was too foreign to possibly grade him properly. Overall, the most damning bit, though, is the interactions that we have now found out about that happened between faculty members, indicating that they were really unsettled by him and that they were afraid that he was, in fact, smart enough to finish the degree. And they felt that if they gave him that power of that credential to then be a professor or a teacher or a law enforcement agent, that he would eventually use that to his advantage to be a predator. I'm so glad that that was documented via email. The list goes on. Comments about disabilities to other students. An HR meeting was held to discuss his behavior and his discriminatory comments. Lots of stuff happening here, but every school will have a code of conduct or an honor code that outlines disciplinary actions for infractions or deviations from expected normative behavior. You have to have a solid, documented audit trail of both the infractions and any attempts you made to remediate them, depending on the severity, to really push forward with some serious movement. And I know that's basically like saying, oh, I'm being stalked. Police officer, can you help me? Well, no, because he hasn't hurt you or done anything to you. And you think, yet, but if you help me, he won't have the opportunity. That's kind of, I know it feels that way. Because I'm basically saying you got to have a real case before you can do anything about it, which is true. You also don't want to be someone that has a case brought against you willy-nilly if you haven't done anything wrong. So it's a, double-sided coin. But people like to create false reports as a weapon sometimes. Weaponized reporting has been used in SA cases. So it's a balancing act. But, it's not unusual for this to be a situation of, if you don't stop doing XYZ, then this is going to happen. And following, not 3 strikes necessarily, but strike 1, strike 2, because you don't also want to take arbitrary, what might seem as retaliatory actions against a student in this case, because they're an asshole. It's just as easy as that would be. You do have to have something.
Yeah. Well, and this is a couple things when you were talking. This is kind of what I was thinking of. I mean, he makes me feel uncomfortable because here are his actions. Right. Has he targeted me yet? No.
Right.
But will he? He makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
And also, I know this made me so mad. I know Ann Taylor was like, all of those things is just his autism.
I have a segue for you on the autism part. Not right now, but I do have that. I wanted to get your take on that.
It shattered my brain. But go ahead. We'll circle back to it. You go.
No, but also we know now why she really didn't want this stuff coming in. Mm-hmm. But more to your point, it's a slow burn, so to speak, to build a case against somebody, even in a university. But you do have to, at least to the best of your ability, follow that process. Now, if you feel like your life is in danger, obviously, if there's any evidence to support that, we're going to throw that out the door and we're just going to, we're going to take care of this. But you build this case, you document, you build this audit trail. I think in this situation, as far as what WSU did, it's actually more reactive than a lot of cases I've seen where it's an endless sort of hell loop for people dealing with a person or people feeling harassed, because it's so subjective. What you might think or feel is harassment, someone else might say, is it though? So it's hard. But I think so far, and we'll talk more about this in a second, what WSU did to address Brian Koberger sounds like, God, everyone was complaining. Why didn't they do anything? They did. They filed complaints. They started really keeping a closer eye on him. They started being proactive instead of reactive, but they eventually yanked him out of that program, took his job, his funding, and his whole existence away. And I can tell you, I have had frustration in my role as a conduct officer when I've seen some ugly, nothing you're going to say to me will ever shock me, offend me. I've heard it all. I've seen it all. I have had restraining orders to file against people just in case that have gotten on planes, flown across the country to come to my office to have a word with. Like, it's bad. I'll make an appointment later to shake in my boots. I don't have time for it, but that's why I was pretty good at my job. But I have felt the annoyance of an institution behind me going, basically saying, well, how much further can we document this so we can really have a strong case, instead of, okay, dude, does he have to come murder me first before you, like, I get it. I think WSU responded quicker than I've seen sometimes by taking action against him. And that's not to say that it will happen that way every time. Maybe another school has a zero tolerance and you're just gone. I don't think that's fair. So it probably doesn't exist, but I think they had a great case against him had the homicides not happened and he continued to be a student there, because they didn't take away his matriculation. They took away his job as a TA, which then pretty much paid for his existence there because he needed room, board. So had they acted any quicker, because remember, it's not like he was there long. It's not like he was doing this for 3 years. This was pretty quick. I think their responses were appropriate, especially that they had so much faculty evidence in the back and forth emails talking about him and fearing that he could be a predator. That would have been really strong evidence. And that's not to say that faculty members are more valuable than student feedback. But when you think about the world we live in and the optics, are you going to believe Google or the Mayo Clinic online or the doctor in front of you who's diagnosing you? You're more likely to give more implied trust to the doctor because they have the training, the education, the experience. Same is true about faculty who observe students, who are well aware or should be aware of what policy is, who have dealt with it, seen it, been there, done that. And I've met some heinous faculty members in my day that made my job very hard. It's very rare. I've also been a professor, but most of the time, their perspective is a lot less skewed or biased. They don't necessarily have a personal interest in the outcome other than everyone being safe, because they're not looking for a grade or they didn't get rejected for a date. Like, they have a trustworthy perspective that I think holds a lot of value in a complaint. Now, the second acronym, we've already covered IRB, SMEs, OCR. An OCR complaint was filed in this case, which surprised me. I don't want to say it surprised me because there wasn't enough for it, but at the same time, I think I should explain what OCR is and what they do, because I've had OCR complaints filed against me. It's like the jaywalking of things when you work in conduct and complaints, like a Better Business Bureau complaint. Most businesses will farm that out to someone to respond, case closed. You really have to have a strong case to have an outcome from an OCR investigation. And you shouldn't just file them either willy-nilly because you think someone's an asshole and he was misogynistic to you. But as far as OCR is concerned, OCR is the Office of Civil Rights. Normally, I would say that these complaints, just for the sake of complaining, are really disruptive and not respectful of people's time and resources. A lot of work and investigation goes into an OCR complaint. But in this case, I actually really appreciate that they filed it just to document it somewhere. This is the faculty member who was uncomfortable with his sexist behavior, that felt like he was hovering and following her. That's not really a strong OCR complaint. That's more of a law enforcement complaint. However, the concept of reporting it to an external body to document it, fantastic. Most cases, I've had really frivolous OCR cases. It's like going to a car dealership knowing you're not buying a car, you're just going to test drive. That's a waste of the salesman's time. They work on commission. A lot of people like to file complaints that don't really fall into that category just to get what they want because they don't like the word no. But in this case, looks like the faculty member filed an OCR complaint against him just to document it somewhere, which was very smart. We'll never know the outcome of that. I can almost guarantee you it went nowhere as far as an outcome that has any actionable consequence. They probably couldn't validate the concern with evidence because that's the point. And what they do, it's basically, how do I want to explain this?
So give us the example that happened to you as a way to explain.
So, all right, I'll try to explain what OCR is. It is an external body that is also regulated by the Department of, I think it's HHS that also does this as well. But they're there to ensure that you are not treated adversely based on a protected class. So being a woman, being an immigrant, ageism, for being discriminated against because of your gender, because of where you come from, or your religious beliefs. To file an OCR complaint is to say, I have been severely discriminated against and treated adversely because of insert here. I'm a woman. I am blind. I am deaf. I am from another country. I am an atheist. That's what the OCR, federally regulated OCR, by the way, that's what they do. They get your complaint and then they investigate. Now, this could result, if it's actually true and they find like, yeah, you were discriminated against, a policy change or restitution, things like that. The OCR handles protected class discrimination and harassment investigations. So in my case, for example, I have had one OCR case that the student, I think it was just like it was a non-gender specific name, like Alex. And at this point, the institution I was at was fully remote and online, not face-to-face. And in most instances, you weren't on camera in your class either. And we, at the time, this was several years back now that I've left higher education, we didn't have preferred name and pronouns in our system to identify your gender unless you put a picture of yourself in a classroom or a discussion forum, or you specifically refer to yourself as a she or a he. It's going to be impossible for a professor to know whether or not you're male or female. Unless your name is Joseph Macho Man Smith, the professor is going to assume if you have a name like Alex that they don't know anything about you. And that's what happened here for me. It was my instructor gave me a terrible grade because I'm a woman. And I had a lot of centralized authority in the area I was in because I was insulated by my own department. I wasn't a part of the dean's office, so I could do as much research as I could without being sort of influenced by anybody. And when I got the complaint from OCR, they do a preservation notice, emails, communications, any documentation that the whole organization has on it. You can't destroy anything. And reading the complaint, I'm a straight A student. This professor has been rude to me the whole time. He gave me a D because I'm a woman. And I'm like, okay, let me start somewhere. So I started looking at her historical grade record. And by the way, she ended up being a woman, yes, but I looked at her complete academic history. Straight A student, sure. That's an indicator that you're a high achieving student, but it doesn't mean that you are or should expect to get an A every single time. Then you look at, what's normal for you in workload. Are you doing a lot above and beyond word count or page numbers? Or are you going above and beyond? Are you engaging as much as you need to be in the classroom? Is your command of the written word very good? Using a lot of deductive reasoning. And then you look at their performance inside the classroom, working with other people objectively. And sometimes I would go so far as to pull the work from the classroom myself and just do a regrade to see where I ended up. What does this work look like to me if I was grading this right now? Do I agree with the comments or the feedback? Did it match the assignment requirements, the rubric? And in this case, it just wasn't the strongest class for her, and she was used to getting straight A's. She was a 4.0 student on the dean's list, and this class was, I think, it was an elective. Sorry. It was an elective class, so it wasn't required, and it was way light years from what her program was. It was like taking a nursing class in a business program. And I looked at the back and forth in their emails because that's what I had access to. I looked at her comments in the classroom. I looked at the writing and the project work. I looked at the instructor's feedback. Does the instructor have a long history of complaints against them? Ultimately, she just didn't like getting a D. The work was good, but she lacked a lot of background in the subject the class was in because it wasn't part of her program. And she did a good job of flowering it up, but it really just was not on the target she was supposed to hit. And that's why she got a D. It was a big part of her grade. It dragged her whole grade down. And there was no indication in the classroom that she ever referred to herself as she, indicated, oh, I have a partner, I have children. Doesn't mean you can only have a male partner, but there's no pictures. I could not see where the correlation was woman and D. And the instructor's feedback was, it was harsh at some points, but it was realistically harsh. And I was looking for indicators in writing primarily because this was online. Jane Austen was part of my master's capstone. Really teaches you, if you like Jane Austen, probably not a lot of you, I'm a nerd. She used a lot of coded language and she was a very good satirist. Like she is actually very cheeky. But the way that women and men and those gender roles, especially well before the modern era, the way that those were, the way that you embody your role as a man or a woman is reflected in the way that you speak. So the way that you express yourself and embed certain flags, so to speak, can often indicate to someone that doesn't know your name or gender whether you're female or male. Men use significantly fewer words than women do. You ask a man, especially if you read Jane Austen, the percentage and the ratio of communication from men and women was always way imbalanced because women are taught to be pleasing, to be flowery and fluffy, to be non-assuming, not burdensome, cumbersome. So if you read a Jane Austen novel, you'll see, hello, sir, how are you? I'm fine. Well, you? But a woman would go, oh, thank you so much for asking. That's so kind of you. I'm doing lovely. More adverbs, more adjectives. You can tell the difference. So I'm looking through their correspondence to see, did she give any indication based on emojis or extra adverbs, fluff, flower? Did her writing
points.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did her writing look female by that standard when you're thinking about it? Not really, actually, which was surprising, but even that would have been a stretch for her to say, but it was obvious. But my mind went there because that's part of one of my degree programs that I nerded out with, and I taught English. I immediately started looking for any code switching, nothing. She was pissed, but the OCR said, well, I guess we got nothing here. Have a good day. And that's how it usually goes. Because believe it or not, there are not institutions just in high numbers, like a field of colleges that have people that discriminate, that openly discriminate. It's a lot about subjective perception. And sometimes it really boils down to, I didn't like the answer I got, so I'm going to complain to someone. That I want to talk to the manager shit doesn't really work here, which is why complaining just to get a different answer, don't you do that, or you might end up talking to me and you don't want to do that. But
well, like it almost feels
they did the right thing here. I'll say that. They did the right
thing, but in some instances, like what it's meant for in these cases that are actually serious or being used to see, like, I, at a minimum, want to really inconvenience this person and make them upset. And it's like, that's not what it's for, you know?
Right. Yep.
Which is annoying.
So you can go online and you submit a form on the OCR website and you basically outline your complaint. You attach relevant documents. The burden of proof is on you. You need to provide them with enough they can start an investigation. They'll come to the institution and say, we need a document preservation for this student. Here's the problem. So that could be emails, assignments, and then we give them everything we have and give our narrative explanation of what on our end occurred. And it's up to the OCR to determine whether that person was discriminated against. And usually the answer is no. It's just, as is true with most human things, two different perspectives, feelings. You can't change the way someone feels, but you can change the way you influence how they feel. You know what I mean? But I don't know if they lost that case either, but it doesn't sound like they were hoping it would go anywhere. It sounded from the document dump like maybe they did just do it to document it somewhere, which, you know what? Good for you, because this is a gray area. Like, what do you do with this? It's, you know,
100%.
But more importantly, back to the topic that you brought up, we need to separate the cause and the symptoms that are being used as explanations for his behavior. So I will say this. There's a loophole here. Factoring in the autism word. Being rude or a misogynist, or again, being an asshole, isn't illegal, although that would be super fun. Having autism is also not an indictment, because that's also a variable here. If there was no disclosure, though, so I don't know where this came from. Did the autism, like, hot word, like, come up after he was arrested, or was this a well-known fact about him? I don't know. Autism is also a really hot topic now in the legal world. I have recently had lots of conversations with criminal attorneys who are actually digging now into the forefront of the autism defense, so to speak, not to use it as a defense, but how that can affect how criminal defendants are prosecuted and what consideration should be taken. So here's the loophole. If he did not disclose to the administrative offices of that school that he had a disability, or he didn't have a DSO, that's a disability services officer. Every college has one. If you are blind and you need to have audiobooks, or if you are deaf and you need to have different accommodations in class, there's a process. Extra test taking time, converting a written exam to an oral exam. There is a way to get on the record accommodations if you have a documented disability. But the university does not have to consider neurodivergence as a mitigator or protect him from any of the consequences of his actions if he did not disclose that. It's like having FMLA at work. If you don't file that paperwork, you know, you're having a surgery, I might be out a week, but I could be out 6 months because something could happen, to protect your job. They don't have to protect your job just because they're nice and they know you had surgery. If he didn't have documented DSA accommodations with that school, both in his academic career and for his personal safety, he can't use the disability defense for his behavior, for his routines, for the things he said or did, or to say, you're discriminating against me because I have autism and that explains some of this. That's the loophole. Had he had an accommodation on file, that would have made this so much more difficult for WSU. But to my knowledge, we'll never know. But my knowledge would be it's not part of the document dump so far. They could subpoena FERPA records from a university if they really wanted to go that far. They probably didn't get that far, but they could have. I would bet my life that he did not have an accommodation on file, and that would have made him free game to just hold him responsible for the way he behaved, regardless of neurodivergence, because he would not have been protected whatsoever. So I want to let you rip on this, because the autism component here, really, I get one side, but the other side, I'm like, what in the whole entire hell are you doing? And you are probably the strongest autism advocate I know. So what's your big weigh in on all of that? Because I'm anxious to hear that.
Well, here's the thing. So I have members of my family who are on the spectrum. I won't say who or on what level or any of that. I have gone to DC to advocate for individuals with disabilities, specifically those who are on the spectrum. Now, here's what I will say. Autism isn't a deliberate action of following someone to their car, standing in the hall, and like being, racist or whatever. Hang on one second. I got a cough.
While you're coughing, I'll say this. His autism may have contributed to his greatly awkward, someone disconnected, or even aloof behavior, but make no mistake, he articulated he's a very conservative, gender role-based approach to life, and his values informed his comments and his behavior towards women far more than his autism did. Full stop.
Yeah. So I'll kind of start over. I mean, those who have autism are known for maybe looking at someone a little bit longer than they should have, doing things that socially are a little bit more awkward, not reading social cues, not understanding social cues. For example, if I am to go to someone who is on the spectrum, I know that there's a lot of there are individuals with autism or they're autistic people. Put all that aside. If I were to go to them and be like, do I look fat in this? And they're like, yeah.
Severe honesty. Yeah.
Yeah. That's, if that's what they think, that's what they think. They're not going to socially think and process I don't want to hurt this person's feelings, and there's all these nuances to what she's asking me or whatever.
Right.
They're not going to play the you're a woman grading my paper, my academic paper. I'm going to take it to a male because they'll get it. They'll understand.
Right.
Also, Ann Taylor using, he's got autism. I think that she had to know something was coming through the pipeline to throw that to the wall to see if it stuck. I don't, because going through kind of what she said, I don't think she believed that.
Right.
I think she knew she was dealing with someone who was dangerous.
Right. And the distinction here, people say psychopath because it sounds like that pinnacle of evil.
Yeah.
He's not a psychopath. Clinically speaking, he would be a sociopath because psychopaths, they're not capable of forming human connection and emotional connection. And he loves his mommy and daddy and dog.
That's a blanket
that.
kind of, it's almost like some people using the term
gaslighting
inappropriately. Yes. Where it's that's not gaslighting.
And calling everyone that's selfish a narcissist. That actually has little yes. I knew exactly.
Not using that word appropriately.
We're connected.
The same language. Our nervous systems are very much attached.
They're very synced up right
now. So anyway, my point is autism isn't the traits that he had.
Right.
They probably were well, this looks bad, so we're just going to use this term to kind of excuse some of this behavior, when it's well, if you're properly diagnosed and there are some things that are happening. Sorry, my dog's barking. Some things that are happening.
Join in.
I know.
Mine will bark too in a minute.
Yeah, they're singing the song of their people. So I could kind of understand that. However, it didn't work. I think that she was trying, but I think she knew at the end of the day that was the wrong term to use for her client, but she was trying, and I get it. Yep. But to be clear, that is not autism. That's not what autism is or looks like. I think that was something that they were trying to use to dismiss some of this behavior, to have an argument, to kick some of these things out when they went to trial. Anyway, I digress.
No, but that's exactly the point I was making. And I'm glad that I followed that train down the logic tracks, because I was thinking to myself earlier, the very deep nuances of autism and how delicately you'd have to river dance around that in this case, in any case. Make no mistake. The cause and the symptoms are not the same thing. The cause and effect, not the same thing. The autism was not the cause for what he said, what he believed, and how he acted. The autism was just about the delivery. But the back-ass words 1950s mindset and the core values that he articulated openly that he had, about women and then not being able to get one that just pissed him off even more, that was not informed by neurodivergence. That was informed by being an asshole.
Plain
Just
and simple.
saying. No,
they're not SAT words. They're just... And I think there's a difference between, like, being annoyed. I'll use that word. And that's fine. Being annoyed or feeling unsafe.
Absolutely.
And I think that those are two very different things. And so, I, kind of in closing, that kind of just really, like, barbecued my insides when everybody was like, autism, and I'm like, what? You know? So, anyway, guys, if you've made it this far, you're the real one.
You really are. This was just very interesting. I had never thought about this. I'd never been asked this question, but to close her up, the penalty phase, this would have been a really great aggravating factor. It's totally understandable why Ann Taylor wouldn't want this in. It's pretty powerful. But oh my God, my stomach's like, stop!
I know.
It would have been powerful enough that he could have been expelled, dismissed. They took those steps. I don't think anything else could have happened in the amount of time that this was happening in. But the short answer to the long ass question, after all of that exposition, is yes, it could hypothetically have changed the outcome of this case. But it doesn't mean that he wouldn't have found his opportunity elsewhere when his plans got foiled had he been dismissed or had he not graduated on time. It would not have changed who he is and what he wanted to do, because when you're that determined, you're going to do what you're going to do.
Yeah, you're going to do what you're going to do. It's going to happen. So, could it have been someone else in a different circumstance? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
you've seen behind the curtain now of how the inner workings of handling that are just like exhausting. It's exhausting, and it takes a special type of person to deal with it. Yeah, which is why I no longer do it after 14 years.
We've had a career change.
I was famous.
You're famous now.
I take 0 prisoners. 0. BK would have hated me. I also would not have been afraid of him either, which would probably have pissed him off. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I will. And you're going to have to deal with me whether you like it or not. So what are we going to do?
Facts and evidence. Anyway, I know. It's fine. I know. I've got soapboxes, and I've really had to pull back on some of this stuff with the whole autism bit. I just kind of wanted to say my piece.
Right.
But anyway, please share. Subscribe if you want, if you like these ramblings. We have a lot coming down the pipeline. If you like this content, please leave a comment below. If
you didn't, just put an emoji and leave your piece there. Just put an emoji and then,
just do one of these little emojis, like the heart hands or whatever. If this isn't your jam,
let's make it a positive no. But
anyway, but we've got more content to come. Donna's coming up. We're going to have a full explanation of the beginning of the Markel case to where we are now, because there's motions being thrown in. There's issues and problems. There's a picture of Harvey in a really creepy picture. I've been
in a work rabbit hole all day. I just took a break for this because my brain was like, I can do this now. I'll remember all of this now. I'm going to have to go do some Googling.
I know. Anyway, Kimberly, your god kids are hungry.
Oh, they want the animal ones or the human ones?
Both. They are waiting for me.
That's fair.
So, see our friends out.
Please make good choices. Don't be a walking one of these. And we will hopefully catch you next time. So
love you.
Bye, guys. Love you.